The grand chamber of the Galactic Council floated in the emptiness of space, a massive structure of crystal and metal that had witnessed 35 centuries of careful peace. Inside its largest hall, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood alone before the assembled representatives of 4 alien civilizations. Her simple gray suit contrasted sharply with the elaborate form surrounding her. The Krell High Coordinator rose first, its 3 eyes blinking in sequence as telepathic waves filled the room. It spoke aloud for the humans' benefit, its voice like grinding stones. "Human Ambassador, we have tolerated your species long enough. The armistice that ended the First Contact War is hereby declared void." Sarah's face remained perfectly still. She had expected this, but hearing the word still sent ice through her veins. The Vrax Collective speaker clicked forward on 6 chitinous legs, its compound eyes reflecting Sarah in 1,000 fractured images. "Your kind has hidden behind borders for too long. The galaxy has evolved. You have not. Submit to Council authority or face the consequences." From the water-filled sphere, the Depth Lord's translator crackled to life. "We have watched you, humans. You have grown soft. Your warriors are gone. Your children play in gardens and know nothing of war. This is good. Submit peacefully and you will be allowed to continue your simple existence under our guidance." The Luminar delegate pulsed with colors that the translation device rendered as speech. "We have studied your military capabilities. Your fleet numbers 3,000 vessels. Our combined forces total 150,000 warships. This is not a war you can win. This is mathematics." Sarah listened to each declaration with the same calm expression. When the last echo faded from the chamber, she took a single step forward. The aliens tensed, unused to human body language but instinctively recognizing a predator's movement. "Is that your final position?" Sarah asked, her voice soft and clear. The Krell High Coordinator's telepathic presence pressed against her mind, trying to read her thoughts, searching for fear. It found something else entirely. Something that made it recoil. "It is decided. You have 1 standard cycle to respond. Use that time to prepare your surrender." Sarah Chen smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was not a scared smile. It was the cold smile of someone who knows a terrible secret. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Thank you for your clarity," she said simply. "It makes things much easier." She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. The aliens watched her go, confused by her response. They had expected begging or threats or at least some display of emotion. The smile had unnerved them, but they pushed the feeling aside. Fear was making her irrational, they assured themselves. As the door sealed behind her, Sarah touched the communication device hidden in her collar. "Execute protocol remembrance," she whispered. "They've made their choice." 3,000 light-years away on a planet that appeared on no Galactic Council maps, an ancient computer system received the signal. It had waited patiently for 35 centuries, maintained by generations of humans who hoped it would never be needed. Now its purpose was clear. The activation sequence began. In orbit around Earth, General Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the orbital command station, watching the feeds from the Nexus. He was an older man with gray hair and scars that spoke of violence long past. When Sarah's message came through, he closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of what was about to begin. "Signal received, sir," his communications officer reported. "Protocol remembrance is active." Marcus opened his eyes and looked at the display showing Earth below, peaceful and blue. "Send the recall to all Colonial Defense Forces. Wake the silent fleet, and someone get me a line to Admiral Volkov." Around him, officers moved with practiced efficiency. There was no panic, no confusion. They had drilled for this scenario thousands of times. Every human in military service knew this day might come. They had prepared for it since childhood. "Sir," a young lieutenant approached nervously. "The civilian channels are reporting the Council's declaration. People are scared." Marcus turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression that she had never seen before. It was not anger or fear. It was certainty. "Tell them," he said slowly, "that they have nothing to fear. Tell them we kept our promise. Tell them we were ready." Across human space, from the densely populated inner worlds to the rough frontier colonies, the message spread. The armistice was over. War had been declared. And with the message came something unexpected that the aliens monitoring human communications could not understand. Relief. 3,500 years was a long time to wait. A long time to prepare. A long time to hope you would never need to use what you had built. But if the time came, humanity was ready. In the deep black between stars where no alien sensors could reach, massive structures began to power up. Ships larger than anything in the known galaxy started their engines for the first time. These were the vessels of the Silent Fleet, built in absolute secrecy over centuries, using technology that humanity had painstakingly developed from studying captured alien systems and then improving upon them with human ingenuity. Admiral Katerina Volkov received Marcus's call in her quarters aboard the flagship Nevermore. She had been asleep but woke instantly when the priority signal chimed. "Tell me," she said simply. "It's time, Katerina." They declared war. Sarah gave them every chance to reconsider. Katerina dressed quickly, her movements efficient and purposeful. "How long do we wait?" "Let them make the first move. Let them attack our border worlds. We need the galaxy to see who broke the peace. They will die, Marcus. The civilians on those worlds, I know." His voice was heavy. "They know, too. They volunteered." This was the ugly truth of humanity's preparation. Every border world was populated by volunteers who understood they would be the first targets. They were not helpless victims. They were the bait in a trap 35 centuries in the making. Back on the Nexus station, the alien representatives congratulated themselves on a decision well made. The humans would surrender or be destroyed. Either outcome benefited the Council. They would finally have access to Earth's resources and the valuable Sol system. They would study human biology and learn their secrets. "Did you see the human's face?" the Vrak speaker chittered to the others. She smiled, like a primitive showing teeth. She was clearly terrified and trying to hide it. The Krell High Coordinator was less certain. "I touched her mind briefly. What I felt was not fear." "Then what?" asked the Depth Lord. The Krell's 3 eyes closed in sequence, a gesture of uncertainty. "I am not sure, but I have recommended our fleet advance with caution." "Caution?" The Luminar's colors flashed with amusement. "Against 3,000 primitive vessels? We have already won. The war is over before it begins." But in the depths of space, Sarah Chen sat alone in her ship, heading back toward human territory. She had not eaten. She had not slept. She simply stared out at the stars and thought about what was coming. Her grandfather had fought in the First Contact War. He had told her stories that never made it into the history books. Stories about what humans had done when pushed to the edge. Stories about the horrors that made both sides agree to stop. "Forgive us," she whispered to the stars. "We tried to stay peaceful. We really did try." Behind her, the Council Nexus grew smaller in the distance. Ahead, her homeworld waited. And between them, the galaxy was about to learn an old lesson. Never mistake kindness for weakness. Never assume silence means surrender. And never ever make humanity choose between peace and survival. They always choose survival. And they are very, very good at it. Commander Zexthal of the Krell 4th Fleet reviewed the intelligence reports on human civilization with growing satisfaction. The data was clear and comforting. Humanity controlled exactly 47 star systems, all clustered within 500 light-years of their homeworld. Their fleet consisted of 3,000 registered vessels, most over 2 centuries old. Their population was estimated at 90 billion, spread across their various colonies. "They are a small civilization," Zexthal reported to the War Council. "Contained, manageable. Our forces will overwhelm them in a matter of weeks." What Zexthal did not know, what none of the Council species knew, was that every number in that report was a lie. Not a lie that humans had told, but a lie that the aliens had told themselves by seeing only what they wanted to see. The truth was being discussed in a very different meeting, deep beneath the surface of a moon called Sanctuary 7, located in a system so far from Council space that it would take their fastest ships 3 years to reach it. General Marcus Webb stood before a holographic display that showed the real extent of human civilization. Red dots marked colonies. There were thousands of them. Blue lines showed trade routes connecting systems across a volume of space that dwarfed the entire Galactic Council's territory. Green markers indicated military installations, and there were so many that they blurred together in clusters. "This is what they don't know," Marcus said to the assembled officers. "This is what 35 centuries of peace bought us. Time, space, and distance from their watching eyes." Admiral Katerina Volkov studied the display with the eye of a strategist. When we agreed to the armistice, we promised to stay within our borders. We kept that promise. We just never defined what our borders were. It was technically true. The armistice had specified that humanity would remain in the agreed-upon territory for the duration of the peace. The Council had assumed this meant the 47 systems humanity occupied at the time. They had never asked humanity to confirm this. Humans had never volunteered the information, and while the Council watched humanity's core worlds, human colony ships had been spreading in the opposite direction, into the deep dark where Council sensors did not reach. The first ships had left Sol only 50 years after the armistice was signed. They were generation ships moving slowly, quietly, without fanfare. They carried with them everything humanity had learned from the war. They carried seeds and genetic samples and frozen embryos. Most importantly, they carried a mission: survive at all costs. Over 3,000 years, these colonies had grown. They had developed. They had built their own ships and sent out their own colonists. And because they were so far from the Council's watching eyes, they had built something else too: the Silent Fleet. Marcus gestured, and the display changed, now showing ship profiles. Massive dreadnoughts that made the largest Council vessels look like toys. Carriers that could deploy thousands of fighter craft. Weapons platforms equipped with technology that the Council had never imagined possible. "The Council thinks we have 3,000 ships," said Admiral Chen, Sarah's older brother and commander of the 3rd Colonial Fleet. "The actual number is closer to 170,000, and unlike their fleet, all of ours are new." A young officer raised her hand hesitantly. "Sir, I don't understand. If we had this much power, why did we stay hidden? Why did we let the Council think they were superior?" Marcus smiled sadly. "Because our grandparents learned a terrible lesson during the First Contact War. They learned what humans become when we embrace violence fully. They learned that we are very good at war. Too good, it frightened them. So they chose peace, and they taught us to value it above almost everything else." He pulled up another display, this one showing casualty figures from the First Contact War. The numbers were staggering. Billions dead on both sides, entire planets rendered uninhabitable, war crimes that both sides had agreed to never speak of again. "We stayed hidden because we hoped we would never be needed," Marcus continued. "We built all of this as insurance, as preparation, but we prayed it would gather dust. The Council just told us that our prayers were not answered." Far away, on Earth itself, Dr. Sarah Martinez worked in a laboratory buried under 3 miles of solid rock. Her specialty was xenobiology, the study of alien life. For 35 centuries, humanity had been studying their former enemies, studying their strengths, studying their weaknesses, and developing ways to exploit both. "The Krell are telepathic," she explained to her research team. "They use psychic networks to communicate and coordinate their fleets. This is their greatest strength, but it is also a vulnerability. A properly designed neural feedback pulse can turn their own telepathy into a weapon against them." She pulled up a simulation showing what happened when a Krell fleet encountered such a pulse. The psychic backlash spread through their telepathic network like a virus, incapacitating ships across entire battle groups. The Vraks have a hive mentality. Kill the queen nodes and the workers become confused and uncoordinated. The Depth Lords require high-pressure aquatic environments. Breach their hulls and they die in seconds. The Luminar communicate through light. Blind them and they cannot function. Another scientist frowned. "This seems cruel. Are we really going to use all of this?" Dr. Martinez turned to face her colleague. Her expression was hard. "They declared war. They chose this. We are going to survive. If that seems cruel, then they should have chosen peace." This was the other thing that the Council had not understood about humanity. Humans could be incredibly kind, generous, and peaceful. They could also be absolutely ruthless when survival was at stake. The switch between these two states was not gradual. It was instant and total. Back on Sanctuary 7, Marcus received a communication from the border worlds. "Sir, Council fleets are massing near the Tau Ceti system. We estimate they will attack within 72 hours. "Good," Marcus said quietly. "Commander Tanaka, you have your orders. Make them remember why their ancestors agreed to peace." Commander Yuki Tanaka was young for a starship captain, only 32 years old, but she came from a family of warriors stretching back countless generations. Her ship, the Remembrance, was officially a destroyer from the old fleet. It was 300 years old and scheduled for decommissioning. Unofficially, it had been retrofitted with weapons systems that had not existed 3 weeks ago. Yuki sat in her captain's chair and looked at her crew. 30 men and women, all volunteers, all knowing that this mission was one way. When they come, she told them, we show them the price of breaking faith. We show them that humans keep promises. And we promised that if peace ended, we would make them regret it. The crew nodded. Not one of them looked scared. They looked determined, focused, ready. In the council territories, celebrations had begun. The Krell broadcast their intentions across their empire. They would humble the humans. They would bring them into the galactic fold properly. They would show these primitive creatures what true power looked like. The Vrax queens laid millions of eggs preparing warrior drones for the occupation forces. They expected humanity to surrender quickly, but they prepared for potential resistance. They thought they were being cautious. The Depth Lords practiced their invasion formations in the deep oceans of their homeworld. They sang songs of victory in their subsonic language. They imagined the rich oceans of human worlds coming under their control. The Luminar calculated probabilities. Every simulation showed the same result. Overwhelming council victory. The math was simple. More ships, more resources, more territory equals victory. The Luminar trusted mathematics above all else. They did not account for variables they did not know existed. In the darkness between stars, the silent fleet waited. 170,000 ships, their crews ready, their weapons charged, their engines humming with barely contained power. They had trained their entire lives for this. Their parents had trained for this. Their grandparents had trained for this. 3,500 years of preparation was about to be tested, and on a small observation station on the edge of Tau Ceti space, Commander Tanaka watched the sensors as the Krell fleet jumped into the system. 40,000 ships, the largest battle group ever assembled by the Council. They came in formation, precise and confident. Yuki activated the communication system. This is Commander Yuki Tanaka of the Terran vessel Remembrance. You have entered human territory with hostile intent. This is your last chance to withdraw. The Krell Admiral's response came quickly. Single human ship, you are ordered to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Resistance is futile. Yuki looked at her weapons officer. Target their flagship. Full power. But Captain, there are 40,000 of them. We cannot possibly, we are not here to win, Yuki said quietly. We are here to send a message. Fire when ready. The weapons officer's hands moved across the console. Firing. The Remembrance had been old and obsolete, but the weapons now installed in its hull were anything but. They had been designed by the best minds humanity had produced over 35 centuries. They represented the cutting edge of human warfare technology, and they were about to introduce the Krell to a very old human saying, never bring a knife to a gunfight. The first shot from the Remembrance crossed the distance between the human destroyer and the Krell flagship in less than a second. It was not a laser. It was not a missile. It was a gravitational pulse, a weapon that twisted space itself into a crushing fist. The flagship, a massive dreadnought called Pride of Krell, simply crumpled. 3 miles of advanced alien engineering compressed into a sphere barely 50 feet across. 15,000 Krell died instantly, their telepathic death screams echoing across the psychic network that connected the entire fleet. The Krell Admiral, aboard a secondary command ship, felt those deaths like physical blows. All ships return fire. Destroy that vessel immediately. 40,000 ships turned their weapons on the Remembrance. The space around the small human destroyer lit up with energy beams, missiles, and plasma bolts. For a moment it seemed like the tiny ship would be vaporized instantly, but the Remembrance had shields that operated on principles the Krell did not understand. The incoming fire bent around it, redirected by gravity wells that the human ship generated and controlled with impossible precision. Most of the shots missed entirely. Those that connected were absorbed by armor that had been designed to withstand pressures found in the core of a star. Their shields are holding, the Krell tactical officer reported, confusion clear in his mental voice. Our weapons are not penetrating. Then use more ships. Concentrate fire. Nothing can withstand the combined firepower of an entire fleet. But Commander Tanaka was not waiting to be destroyed. Activate the nanite payload, she ordered. Target Group Alpha. From the Remembrance, invisible clouds of microscopic machines spread outward. They moved through space like schools of fish. billions of tiny robots, each smaller than a grain of sand. When they reached the nearest Krell vessels, they attached to the hulls and began to eat. The Krell used organic components in their ship construction, grown and shaped through biological processes. The nanites consumed these organic materials with terrifying efficiency. Within minutes, entire ships were coming apart, their hulls dissolving into clouds of debris. The Krell inside did not die quickly. They suffocated slowly as their ships failed around them, their telepathic terror adding to the chaos spreading through the fleet. "What is happening?" the Krell admiral demanded. "Why are our ships failing?" No one had an answer. The sensors showed nothing. The attacks were invisible. Ship after ship went dark, their hulls compromised, their systems failing. The precise formation of the Krell fleet dissolved into confusion as captains tried to maneuver away from whatever was killing them. Commander Tanaka watched the chaos with no satisfaction, only determination. Load kinetic rounds. Target the carrier groups. The Remembrance had one more weapon to demonstrate. From its forward cannons, it fired solid projectiles. They were simple pieces of metal shaped like spears, each one weighing several tons. But they moved at 90% of light speed. At that velocity, mass became a devastating weapon. The kinetic rounds punched through Krell ships like they were made of paper. Each impact released energy equivalent to a nuclear explosion. Ships did not just die. They vaporized, becoming expanding clouds of superheated gas. The Krell admiral watched in horror as his fleet came apart. In less than 10 minutes, he had lost over 3,000 ships. 3,000 ships destroyed by a single human vessel that their intelligence had classified as obsolete. "Retreat," he ordered. "All ships jump to safety. Retreat now." But the Remembrance was not finished. As the Krell ships began to activate their jump drives, Yuki gave one final order. "Activate the gravity well. Full power." The space around the battlefield suddenly became impossible to leave. The Remembrance generated a gravitational field so intense that it prevented faster-than-light travel. The Krell ships that tried to jump found their drives failing, their engines overloading. Some ships exploded as their jump drives tore themselves apart. "We cannot escape," the tactical officer reported. "They have trapped us here." The Krell admiral felt something he had never experienced before in his 3 centuries of life. True fear. "Signal to all ships. Concentrate all fire on that single vessel. Everything we have. Kill it now." The remaining 37,000 Krell ships turned as one and unleashed everything they had. The combined firepower of an entire fleet, focused on a single point. The Remembrance's shields held for almost a full minute, an impossible achievement that would have seemed like magic to any engineer who understood the physics involved. But even human engineering had limits. The shields failed. The armor, tough as it was, began to melt under the sustained barrage. The hull breached in a dozen places. Commander Tanaka felt the ship dying around her. Emergency systems were screaming. Half her crew was already dead. The artificial gravity failed and she found herself floating in her command chair. "Communications," she said calmly. "Are we still broadcasting?" "Yes, Captain. The transmitter is still functional." "Good." Yuki activated the fleet-wide channel. She knew the Krell were listening. She knew humans across the galaxy were listening. She knew history was listening. "This is Commander Yuki Tanaka of the destroyer Remembrance. To the Krell fleet, you killed one obsolete ship and lost 4,000 vessels in exchange. This is the price of war with humanity. This is what we can do with our old equipment. Imagine what our new fleet will do to you." She paused, looking at her remaining crew. They floated in the ruined bridge, wounded and dying, but none of them looked afraid. They looked proud. To all humans, they made their choice. Now we make ours. Remember what we fight for. Remember why we build weapons we hope never to use. And remember that peace is always better than victory. The final volley from the Krell fleet tore the Remembrance apart. The ship exploded in a flash of light that could be seen from the edge of the system. Commander Tanaka and her crew died instantly, but their message had been sent. And the Krell fleet, battered and confused, was left floating in space trying to understand what had just happened. "Admiral," the communication officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission. It's from human space. They are speaking to us." "Put it through." The voice that came across the channel was calm and measured. It belonged to General Marcus Webb. "Krell fleet, this is Terran Command. You have just destroyed one of our ships and murdered 30 humans. This is an act of war. It is also a mistake you will not survive to regret. The Remembrance was 300 years old. It was scheduled for decommissioning. It was not a frontline vessel. It was not even a reserve vessel. It was a museum piece, and it destroyed 4,000 of your ships. The Krell admiral felt his blood run cold. You lie. This is psychological warfare. Believe what you want, Marcus continued. But you should know that we have been monitoring your invasion fleet. We know exactly where you are. We know your formation. We know your capabilities. And we are sending something much more current to meet you. You have approximately 6 hours before our real fleet arrives. I suggest you use that time to make peace with whatever gods you believe in. The channel closed. The Krell fleet hung in space, trapped by the gravity well that the Remembrance had generated. The field would take hours to dissipate. They had no choice but to wait. Admiral, the tactical officer said quietly, if what they say is true, if that ship was truly obsolete and their new vessels are even more powerful, then we have made a terrible mistake. The Admiral finished. Contact the Nexus, tell them we need reinforcements. Tell them everything. But reinforcements would take days to arrive, and the humans had promised to be there in 6 hours. The Krell began to prepare. They formed defensive positions. They ran diagnostics on all systems. They did everything they could to ready themselves for battle. But among the crews of 37,000 ships, a new feeling was spreading. It was the same feeling their admiral had felt, fear. The humans were coming. And the Krell were beginning to understand that they had not been fighting a war 3,500 years ago. They had been surviving an extermination. The Armistice had not been a victory. It had been mercy, and they had just thrown that mercy away. In the darkness beyond the Tau Ceti system, Admiral Katerina Volkov stood on the bridge of the Nevermore, watching the countdown timer. Beside her, 200 capital ships of the Silent Fleet waited. These were not museum pieces. These were ships that had never seen battle, built with technology that represented the best of human engineering. Their crews were fresh, well-trained, and determined. 5 hours and 57 minutes until we jump, the navigation officer reported. Katerina looked at the display showing the Krell fleet position. 37,000 ships. Under normal circumstances, 200 vessels would not stand a chance against those numbers. But circumstances were not normal. The Krell had just learned what one obsolete human ship could do. They were about to learn what a modern human fleet could accomplish. Prepare all weapon systems, she ordered. When we jump in, I want to hit them before they can react. No mercy, no hesitation. They wanted war. We will give them war. Around her, officers moved with quiet efficiency. There was no battle rage, no bloodlust. There was only cold, professional determination. This was what humanity had become during the long peace. Not warriors who loved war, but protectors who understood that sometimes violence was necessary. And when it was necessary, the Vrax Collective's invasion of New Harvest began exactly as their war planners had predicted. The agricultural world was lightly defended, its population consisting mostly of farmers and terraformers. The Vrax brought a modest force of 5,000 ships, more than enough to overwhelm what they expected to be minimal resistance. Queen Mind X Sathar watched through the eyes of her drones as they descended toward the planet's surface. The world was beautiful, covered in vast fields of golden grain and orchards heavy with fruit. Scattered settlements dotted the landscape, simple structures that housed the human population. It looked peaceful, easy. Begin landing operations, Ixathar commanded through the Hive network. Secure the population centers. Minimal casualties. We want these humans alive to work the fields under proper supervision. The first wave of Vrax warriors touched down near the largest settlement, a town called Harvest Home. The insectoid soldiers moved with coordinated efficiency, surrounding the buildings, prepared for potential resistance. Human figures emerged from the structures, hands raised in apparent surrender. This is easier than expected, a warrior drone reported. The humans are complying. That was when the fields exploded. The irrigation systems that the Vrax had seen from orbit were not irrigation systems at all. They were weapons. Concealed beneath the peaceful farmland were defense grids that had been installed when the colony was founded. Plasma cannons erupted from hidden bunkers. Missile batteries rose from silos disguised as grain storage. Energy shields snapped into place over the settlements. The first wave of Vrax warriors died in seconds, vaporized by weapons fire they had not seen coming. The landing craft trying to deploy reinforcements found themselves targeted by surface-to-air systems that should not have existed on a farming world. "What is happening?" Xethar demanded. "How does an agricultural colony have military-grade weapons?" The answer came from a human voice broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Colonel James Park, New Harvest Defense Force. You made a critical error in your intelligence. Every human colony is a military installation. Every human farmer is a soldier. We learned this lesson 3,000 years ago. Never build anything that cannot defend itself." Colonel Park was 63 years old. He had been farming wheat on New Harvest for 30 years. Before that, he had served in the Colonial Marines for 20 years. Before that, his parents had farmed and fought. Before that, his grandparents. Every generation of his family had learned to grow food and wage war with equal skill. "All units execute defensive pattern Delta," Park ordered. His tone was calm, professional. This was not his first battle. "Remember your training. Protect the settlements. Make them pay for every meter." The humans of New Harvest moved with military precision because they were military. The Vraks had assumed that frontier colonists would be soft, untrained civilians. They were catastrophically wrong. Every adult on New Harvest had spent years in active military service before being allowed to colonize. The children grew up learning to shoot before they learned to read. This was the reality of human expansion. In the dangerous galaxy, humanity did not send the weak to settle new worlds. They sent the strong. They sent veterans. They sent people who could build a farm in the morning and defend it in the evening. The Vraks fleet in orbit watched in confusion as their ground forces were systematically destroyed. "Deploy more warriors," Cathar ordered. "Overwhelm them with numbers." But numbers were not enough. The humans had prepared the entire planet as a battlefield. Every hill had firing positions. Every valley had kill zones. Every forest concealed troops. The Vraks poured drones onto the surface and watched them die in waves. "This is impossible," Xathar hissed. "They are farmers." "Where did they get military training?" "From being farmers," Colonel Park replied, having intercepted the Vraks' command frequency. "We grow food. We raise families. We build communities. And we defend them. All of it, every day. You think these are separate skills. For humans, they are the same skill. It is called survival." After 6 hours of brutal ground combat, the Vraks had lost half their invasion force and had not secured a single settlement. Xethar made the decision to withdraw and bombard the planet from orbit. "If we cannot take it, we will destroy it. Prepare orbital strikes." The orbital bombardment never came. As the Vraks fleet prepared to fire on the planet, sensors detected incoming ships. Lots of ships. The human reinforcement fleet had arrived. And they were not interested in negotiations. Across the galaxy, in the crystalline depths of Luminar space, Admiral Katerina Volkov was teaching the light-based aliens a different lesson. The Luminar had always believed their greatest strength was their communication system. They spoke through light, transmitting data and orders at the speed of photons. It made their coordination perfect. Their responses instantaneous. Admiral Volkov had spent 20 years studying Luminar communications. She understood their language better than most Luminar understood it themselves, and she knew how to lie in it. "Transmit false orders on their command frequencies," she ordered. "Make it look like it is coming from their fleet commander. Tell Group Alpha to withdraw to defensive positions. Tell Group Beta that Alpha has been destroyed and they need to retreat. Tell Group Gamma that reinforcements are coming from behind them." The Luminar fleet dissolved into chaos. Ships moved in conflicting directions, responding to orders that seemed legitimate but contradicted each other. By the time they realized they were being deceived, the human fleet was among them, and close-range combat did not favor the Luminar's long-distance coordination advantage. The battle was brutal and short. The Luminar lost 3 entire fleets before their High Council sued for peace. The humans accepted, but their terms were harsh. Luminar space was now restricted. They would not expand. They would not rebuild their military. They would be watched. But the worst fate befell the Depth Lords. The aquatic species had believed their mastery of ocean warfare was unmatched. They attacked Poseidon, a human ocean world, expecting an easy victory. They found something else entirely. The Marianas Division was humanity's most specialized military unit. They were humans who had been bioengineered to survive in the deepest oceans. Their bodies could withstand crushing pressures that would kill normal humans instantly. Their eyes could see in absolute darkness. Their lungs could extract oxygen from water. They were designed for one purpose: to fight in environments where normal humans could not survive. When the Depth Lords attacked Poseidon, they expected to face humans in submersibles and pressure suits. Instead, they met enemies who could swim faster, dive deeper, and see better in the dark than they could. The Marianas Division fought with weapons designed for underwater combat. Cavitation torpedoes that created bubbles of vacuum that imploded with devastating force. Sonic weapons that used the ocean itself as a medium to destroy. Chemical agents that were harmless to humans but lethal to Depth Lord biology. The battle lasted 3 days. It was fought in the deepest trenches of Poseidon's oceans, in pressures that would crush diamonds and darkness that swallowed all light. When it was over, the Depth Lords had lost their entire invasion fleet. Not a single ship escaped. The surviving Depth Lords who made it back to their homeworld brought stories that seemed impossible. Stories of humans who moved through the water like they were born to it. Stories of enemies who fought in the crushing deep with no fear. Stories of warriors who smiled in the darkness before they killed. Back in Tau Ceti, Admiral Volkov's fleet had finished with the Krell. The battle had been methodical and efficient. 200 human ships had destroyed 37,000 Krell vessels in less than 8 hours. The technology gap was so vast that it had not been a battle. It had been an execution. The few Krell ships that managed to escape carried a message back to their homeworld. A message that spread through the entire Krell collective. A message that their ancestors had known but they had forgotten. Do not fight humans. Ever. Under any circumstances. Peace is not weakness. Peace is mercy. And when humans show mercy, accept it gratefully. General Marcus Webb received the battle reports from all fronts. New harvest had held. The Vracs were in full retreat. The Luminar had surrendered. The Depth Lords were shattered. The Krell were broken. In less than 2 weeks, the combined forces of the Galactic Council had been defeated. Casualty report? Marcus asked quietly. Minimal, sir. New Harvest lost 400 civilians. Various other engagements cost us approximately 3,000 personnel total. Enemy casualties are estimated in the millions. Marcus closed his eyes. 3,000 humans dead, millions of aliens dead. This was why humanity had chosen peace. This was why they had hidden their strength. Because when humans fought, the universe bled. Send a message to all Council territories, Marcus ordered. Tell them we are prepared to discuss terms. But make it clear, the terms will be ours, not theirs. Across the galaxy, the Council species that had been so confident 2 weeks ago now faced the reality of their situ. 6 months after the Council's declaration of war, Ambassador Sarah Chen walked alone across the landing pad of the Nexus station. The massive structure looked different now. Scorch marks from human weapons scarred its crystalline surface. Entire sections remained dark where power systems had been destroyed during the brief battle that had taken place here 3 weeks ago. The battle had not been necessary. The station had been abandoned by its alien staff, but when human ships arrived to secure it, automated defense systems had activated. Those systems were now silent, along with everything else that had tried to stop humanity's advance. Sarah entered the council chambers and found them almost empty. Where once hundreds of representatives from dozens of species had gathered, now only 4 figures waited. The High Coordinator of the Krell, the Queen Mind of the Vracs, a representative of the Luminar, a single Depth Lord and a mobile water tank. They were all that remained of the council's leadership. They looked at Sarah with expressions she had never seen before from them: fear, defeat, and something else, understanding. You came, the Krell High Coordinator said. Its telepathic presence was subdued, carefully neutral. We expected you to simply dictate terms through communications. I came because this conversation deserves to happen face to face, Sarah replied. She sat down at the human delegation seat, the same seat she had occupied 6 months ago when they had declared war. I came because you need to understand what happened and why. The Vracs Queen Mind clicked forward. We understand perfectly. We attacked you, we lost. You were stronger. This is the way of the universe. No, Sarah said firmly. That is not the lesson here. You did not lose because we were stronger. You lost because you did not understand what strength means. She activated a holographic display. It showed footage from the first contact war, 3,500 years ago. The images were horrific. Planets burning. Ships torn apart. Billions dying. War crimes committed by both sides. This is what happened when our two civilizations met, Sarah said. This is what war between spacefaring species looks like when neither side will surrender. Total annihilation, complete destruction, the end of everything. The Luminar representative pulsed with colors that translated to confusion. But you won that war. Our records show that humanity was victorious. We were winning, Sarah corrected. Not the same thing. Yes, we were winning. We were destroying your fleets faster than you could build them. We were taking your worlds. We were on the path to complete victory. She paused, and it was destroying us. She changed the display to show internal human records from that era. Psychological reports. Casualty statistics. Reports of soldiers breaking down, unable to continue fighting but forced to anyway. Ethical complaints from commanders who had been ordered to commit atrocities. We discovered something about ourselves during that war, Sarah continued. We discovered that humans are very, very good at violence. We have a capacity for warfare that terrified even ourselves. We could have destroyed you completely. Every world, every ship, every member of every species that opposed us. We had the weapons. We had the will. We had the momentum. Then why did you stop? The Depth Lord asked through its translator. Because we looked at what we were becoming and decided we did not want to be that. We chose to stop. We offered the Armistice not because we needed peace, but because we wanted to prove to ourselves that we were more than just efficient killers. Sarah stood and walked to the center of the chamber. For 3,500 years we have been trying to be better than we were during that war. We built weapons, yes. We prepared for this day, yes. But we hoped it would never come. We hoped that the Armistice would become permanent. We hoped that peace would become the normal state of the galaxy. The Krell High Coordinator's three eyes blinked in sequence. Then we have destroyed something precious. We have ended a peace that both sides valued. You have, Sarah agreed. And now we must build something new. But it will not be the same. It cannot be the same. You have proven that the old system does not work. She pulled up a document on the display. These are humanity's terms. They are not negotiable. You will accept them or we will enforce them. The terms were simple but absolute. The Galactic Council was dissolved immediately. Each species would return to their home systems and establish a border zone of 500 light-years around their territory. No military vessels would be permitted in these border zones. Humanity would patrol the neutral space to ensure compliance. Any species that violated these terms would be considered to have declared war on humanity. And humanity's response would be immediate and total. You are making yourselves the police of the galaxy, the Vrax Queen Mind protested. You are establishing a tyranny. No, Sarah said coldly. We are establishing order. You had your chance to prove that you could coexist peacefully. You chose war instead. This is the consequence of that choice. She walked to each representative in turn, making sure they understood. We do not want your territory. We do not want your resources. We do not want to rule over you. We want you to go home and stay there. We want you to rebuild your civilizations. We want you to prosper, but we want you to do it far away from us and far away from each other. And if we refuse, the Luminar asked, then we will do what we did to your fleets, Sarah said simply. We will destroy your military capability completely. We will station forces in your systems. We will occupy your worlds. We would prefer not to, but we will if necessary. The silence that followed was heavy. The alien representatives looked at each other, communicating through their various methods. Finally, the Krell High Coordinator spoke for all of them. We accept your terms. We will withdraw to our home systems. We will comply with your monitoring. We ask only one thing. What? Tell us why you showed mercy 3,000 years ago. Tell us why you did not simply destroy us when you had the chance. We need to understand. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. Because my great-great-grandmother fought in that war. She was a ship captain. She destroyed hundreds of Krell vessels. She killed thousands of your people, and when the Armistice was signed, she cried for 3 days straight, not because she had lost, but because she had won, because she had become someone who could kill thousands and feel nothing while doing it. She looked at the Krell directly. She spent the rest of her life teaching children that peace was precious, that violence was sometimes necessary but never good, that the ability to destroy does not mean you should destroy. She made me promise when I was young that if I ever had the power to choose between war and peace, I would always choose peace first. I kept that promise for as long as I could. You forced me to break it. The Krell High Coordinator lowered its head in a gesture of respect. We understand now. We will remember this lesson. We will teach our children. We will not forget again. One by one, the alien representatives signed the agreement. The Galactic Council was officially dissolved. The new order was established. The galaxy would be different now. Safer, perhaps. More peaceful, hopefully. But also lonelier. The dream of a united galactic civilization was over. Sarah left the Nexus station and returned to her ship. The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks. She spent most of it staring out at the stars, thinking about what had been lost and what had been gained. When she finally reached Earth, she went directly to the tomb of the unknown soldier from the First Contact War. It was a simple monument, just a black stone with names carved into it. Thousands of names, millions of names, all the humans who had died in that terrible conflict. She placed a new plaque next to the old one. It read, "They gave us 3,500 years. We did not waste them. We built, we grew, we prepared, and when war came again, we remembered what peace cost. May we never forget again." Above Earth, the silent fleet maintained its orbit. 170,000 ships visible now to anyone who looked up. They were no longer hidden. They were a reminder, a promise, a warning. In his office on Orbital Command Station, General Marcus Webb received reports from across human space. The border zones were being established. Monitoring stations were being built. The former Council species were complying with the terms, some reluctantly, some with what seemed like relief. "Sir," a young officer approached. "The news networks want to interview you. They are calling this a great victory." Marcus shook his head. It was not a victory. It was a necessity. We did what we had to do. Nothing more. Nothing less. What should I tell them, sir? Tell them to go home. Tell them to hug their families. Tell them to be grateful we live in a time of peace again, and tell them to pray it lasts longer than the last one. On New Harvest, Colonel James Park returned to his farm. The fields had been damaged during the battle, but they could be repaired. He spent his days planting new crops and his evenings teaching the next generation how to defend them. The children listened carefully, understanding that farming and fighting were not separate skills. In the Vrax Collective, Queen Mind Exathar laid eggs that would become a new generation of drones. But now, along with warrior training, these drones would learn something new. They would learn about humans. They would learn what happened when you made peaceful species fight. They would learn to value peace. Supreme Archon Kelvanus sat on his crystal throne, watching the holographic display with barely hidden contempt. The three-dimensional map showed the territory of the Valorian hegemony, stretching across 47 star systems. It was beautiful. It was powerful. And now a tiny red dot blinked at the edge of their space, representing the newest problem: humans. "They are building stations in the Corvesh sector," Intelligence Officer Saren said, her voice steady despite the Archon's dark mood. 3 mining outposts and 1 research facility. Our patrol discovered them 2 cycles ago. Kelvanus waved his hand dismissively. "And what makes these creatures different from the last 14 civilizations we encountered? Did we not crush the Netheri? Did the Boscan Confederacy not beg for mercy before we absorbed their worlds?" Saren hesitated. She had studied the reports carefully, more carefully than anyone else in the military command. Something about the humans worried her. Their technology seemed inconsistent, almost primitive in some areas, yet strangely advanced in others. But she knew better than to push the Archon when he was in this mood. "They are still a young species, Supreme Archon. They achieved faster-than-light travel only 200 years ago. By galactic standards, they are children." "Then they should learn to respect their elders," Kelvanus said, standing from his throne. He was tall, even for a Valorian, his scaled skin shimmering with the purple hue of nobility. "Send the 7th Patrol Fleet. Remove their outposts. If they complain, remind them that the Corvesh sector belongs to the hegemony." Admiral Thrace, commander of the 7th Fleet, shifted uncomfortably. "Supreme Archon, perhaps we should attempt diplomatic contact first. The humans have not shown hostility. They may simply be unaware of our territorial claims." Kelvanus turned his cold eyes toward the Admiral. "Are you questioning my judgment, Thrace?" "No, Supreme Archon. I will carry out your orders immediately." The patrol fleet arrived at the human mining station 3 days later. 15 Valorian warships surrounded the small orbital facility. The humans working there never had a chance to evacuate. The Valorian plasma lances tore through the station's thin hull in seconds. Atmosphere vented into space. 3,000 human colonists died in less than 5 minutes. Admiral Thrace watched from his flagship's bridge, feeling a strange emptiness in his chest. It had been too easy. The humans had barely attempted to defend themselves. Their station had almost no weapons, just basic mining lasers meant for cutting asteroids. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the human homeworld," his communications officer reported. "They are demanding an explanation for our attack." Thrace straightened his uniform. "Put them through." A human face appeared on the screen. She was female, with dark hair pulled back tightly and eyes that seemed far too calm for someone whose people had just been slaughtered. She wore a military uniform, simple and functional, with captain's insignia on her collar. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Confederation Space Command," she said, her voice clear and steady. "You have just murdered 3,000 unarmed civilians. We demand an immediate explanation and reparations for this act of war." Admiral Thrace felt a flicker of respect for this human's composure. "I am Admiral Thrace of the Valorian hegemony. Your people were mining in our territory without permission. This was a legal enforcement action." Captain Chen's expression did not change. "You did not attempt communication. You did not issue warnings. You simply opened fire on unarmed civilians. By any definition, Admiral, that is a war crime." "War crime?" Thrace repeated the unfamiliar phrase. "Your species is new to this sector. Perhaps you do not understand how things work here. The Valorian hegemony has existed for 3,000 of your years. We have conquered 14 civilizations. When we claim territory, it becomes ours. When others trespass, we remove them." "I see," Chen said quietly. "Then let me be clear, Admiral. The Terran Confederation does not recognize your territorial claim. The Corvesh sector was unclaimed space, open to all species for peaceful development. You have committed an unprovoked act of aggression against humanity." Thrace felt his scales ripple with amusement. "And what does your Confederation intend to do about it?" "We are sending a response," Chen said simply. "One warship. The TCS Retribution. It will arrive at your position in 72 hours. I suggest you prepare to surrender yourselves for trial." The transmission ended. For a moment the bridge was silent. Then laughter erupted from the crew. One warship? A single vessel against the 15 ships of the patrol fleet? But Admiral Thrace did not laugh. Something in Captain Chen's eyes had disturbed him. She had not shown fear or even anger. She had shown the calm certainty of someone who held all the cards in a game. When news of the exchange reached the Valorian homeworld, Supreme Archon Kelvanus was furious. Not at the human response, but at what he perceived as their disrespect. "One ship?" He roared at his assembled military council. "They dare send one ship as their answer? This is an insult beyond measure." Saren stepped forward cautiously. "Supreme Archon, I have been reviewing the intelligence we have on human vessels. There are inconsistencies. Their ships use technology we do not fully understand. Perhaps we should—" "Enough." Kelvanus slammed his fist on the council table. "I will not hear cowardice in this chamber. Thrace, return to the Corvesh sector. Take the entire 7th Fleet, all 200 vessels. When this human warship arrives, destroy it utterly. I want nothing left but atoms. Let the humans learn what happens when they challenge the hegemony." "Yes." "Supreme Archon," Thrace replied, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. As the council dispersed, Saren remained behind, staring at the intelligence reports on her datapad. She had spent the last 3 days gathering every piece of information available about humanity. What she found terrified her. Humans had not discovered faster-than-light travel 200 years ago, as most species did shortly after achieving spaceflight. They had spent nearly 400 years confined to their own solar system first. 400 years building, testing, and perfecting their technology in the harsh environment of space before they ever left their home star. That was not normal. Most species reached the stars and immediately began expanding, learning as they went. But humans had practiced first. They had made their mistakes in their own backyard, where failure would not doom their species. More disturbing were the historical records. Humans had a concept called world wars, that they had fought multiple times on their home planet. Conflicts that involved their entire species using weapons of mass destruction. They had nearly destroyed themselves several times before, finally achieving peace and reaching for the stars. They were a species that had perfected warfare before they perfected spaceflight. Saren, tried one last time to warn the Supreme Archon, but he dismissed her concerns. The 7th Fleet departed for the Corvesh sector, 200 of the hegemony's finest warships, with Admiral Thrace commanding from the flagship Dominator. They arrived at the nebula and took up defensive positions, sensors scanning for the approaching human vessel. Thrace stood on his bridge watching the displays, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread in his stomach. "Sir, contact," the sensor officer called out. "One vessel emerging from FTL at the edge of the system." "Put it on screen," Thrace ordered. The human warship appeared. It was smaller than expected, perhaps 3/4 the size of a Valorian heavy cruiser. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, with no decorative elements or impressive designs. It looked functional, purposeful, like a tool designed for a specific job. The designation painted on its hull read, TCS Retribution. "Open a channel," Thrace commanded. Captain Chen's face appeared on the screen once more. "Admiral Thrace, I see you brought friends." "Captain Chen," Thrace replied, trying to sound confident. "You are outnumbered 200 to 1. I will give you one opportunity to surrender. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." Chen smiled slightly, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Admiral, I am required by Terran law to offer you the same choice. You have committed war crimes against the Terran Confederation. Surrender now, and you will be given fair trials. Refuse, and we will use all necessary force to bring you to justice." Thrace's scales flushed with anger. "You think one ship can defeat my fleet?" "No, Admiral," Chen said quietly. "I don't think it, I know it. You have 30 seconds to decide." The transmission ended. Thrace stared at the screen, his heart's pounding. Then he turned to his weapons officer. "All ships, open fire. Destroy that vessel." 200 Valorian warships unleashed hell itself upon the TCS Retribution. The space around the TCS Retribution turned into a storm of light and energy. Plasma lances, superheated to millions of degrees, lashed out from the Valorian fleet. Fusion missiles streaked through the void, their warheads carrying enough power to vaporize asteroids. Graviton beams, weapons that could tear apart molecular bonds, focused on the single human vessel. On the bridge of the Dominator, Admiral Thrace watched his tactical display with satisfaction. No ship could survive such concentrated firepower. Nothing in the galaxy could withstand the combined might of 200 warships firing simultaneously. The weapons struck the Retribution's shields in a brilliant explosion of energy. The light was so intense that the view screens automatically dimmed to protect the crew's eyes. For 3 full seconds, the human ship was completely hidden behind a sphere of destructive force. Then the light faded. The Retribution hung in space, completely undamaged. Its shields had not flickered. They had not dimmed. The energy readings showed they were still at full strength, as if the massive attack had been nothing more than a light breeze. "Impossible," Thrace whispered, staring at his instruments. "Sensors, recheck those readings." "There must be an error." "No error, Admiral," the sensor officer replied, his voice shaking. Their shields absorbed the entire barrage. "No damage detected." On the human ship's bridge, Captain Sarah Chen sat in her command chair, watching her own displays with cold efficiency. Around her, the crew worked at their stations with practiced calm. They had trained for this moment. Shield strength at 98%, the defensive systems officer reported. "Capacitors recharging. No hull damage." "Target analysis complete," the weapons officer added. "We have firing solutions on all 200 enemy vessels." Chen nodded slowly. "Open a channel. Let them see what they are facing." Her face appeared on every Valorian ship's communication screen. "Admiral Thrace, I gave you a chance to surrender. You chose violence, so be it. By the authority vested in me by the Terran Confederation, I'm authorized to use all necessary force. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on your souls, because I will not." She closed the channel and turned to her weapons officer. "Fire at will. Target their engines first. I want survivors who can tell others what happened here." "Aye, Captain." The Retribution began to fire. What emerged from the human warship was unlike anything the Valorians had ever encountered. Kinetic projectiles, solid slugs of depleted uranium and tungsten, accelerated to 95% of light speed by magnetic rails. At such velocities, mass became a weapon more terrible than any energy beam. When they struck Valorian shields, they did not dissipate or scatter. They punched through like bullets through paper. Antimatter warheads followed, each containing just enough exotic matter to create devastating explosions. The Valorians knew of antimatter, but they considered it too dangerous and unstable to weaponize. The humans had not only weaponized it, but had made it reliable enough to use in combat. Then came weapons the Valorians had no names for, quantum entanglement disruptors that caused enemy shields to collapse by disrupting the very particles they were made from, focused gravity wells that crushed ships like a giant's fist, particle beams that ignored conventional defenses entirely, passing through shields to cook the crew inside their own vessels. The first Valorian ship, a heavy destroyer, lost its engines in the opening salvo. The second lost its weapons. The third simply exploded when an antimatter warhead breached its reactor core. Admiral Thrace watched in horror as his fleet began to die. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Concentrate fire on that vessel's engines. But the Retribution moved like nothing they had ever seen. It dodged and weaved through their return fire with impossible precision. Every shot the Valorians fired missed by meters or struck shields that seemed designed specifically to counter their weapons. "How is it doing this?" Thrace demanded. "How can one ship move so fast, fire so accurately, and defend against everything we have?" His tactical officer had been analyzing the human ship's movements. "Sir, I believe their computer systems are far more advanced than ours. Their reaction time is nearly instantaneous. And their weapons. They are using targeting systems that predict our movements before we make them. 5 minutes into the battle, 20 Valorian ships were disabled or destroyed. 10 minutes and that number had doubled. The human vessel had not taken a single point of damage beyond the initial barrage. Saren's warnings echoed in Thrace's mind. The humans had spent 400 years in their own solar system, perfecting their technology. While other species rushed to the stars and stopped innovating, humans had continued to improve, to test, to advance. This ship was not just 200 years more advanced than it should be. It was 400 years ahead of where the Valorians expected any new species to be. "Fall back," Thrace ordered. "All ships retreat to—" An explosion cut him off. 3 ships in the vanguard simply ceased to exist, torn apart by weapons that seemed to bend space itself. On the Retribution, Chen watched the tactical display with no satisfaction, only grim determination. She took no pleasure in this slaughter, but it was necessary. The Valorians needed to learn that humanity would not be pushed around, that the death of 3,000 civilians had consequences. "Captain, multiple enemy vessels attempting to flee," her tactical officer reported. "Let them go," Chen ordered. "Target the command ship's engine specifically. Disable it, but do not destroy it. I want Admiral Thrace alive." The Retribution's weapons shifted focus. A precisely aimed kinetic round struck the Dominator's engine section, tearing through armor and destroying the faster-than-light drive. The flagship was left drifting, powerless but intact. The remaining Valorian ships that could still move began to flee in all directions. Some activated their FTL drives and vanished into the safety of hyperspace. Others, too damaged to jump, tried to hide in the nebula's dense gas clouds. Chen did not pursue them. She had made her point. The battle had lasted 47 minutes. Of the 200 Valorian warships that had attacked, 37 were completely destroyed. 119 were disabled, drifting in space with dead engines and shattered weapons. 44 had managed to escape. The TCS Retribution had not suffered a single casualty. Chen stood from her command chair and straightened her uniform. "Helm, bring us alongside the Valorian flagship. Communications, hail them." Admiral Thrace appeared on her screen. His scales had turned a pale gray, the color of shock and fear. Behind him, his bridge was in chaos, with sparking consoles and injured crew members being treated by medics. "Admiral," Chen said quietly, "you attacked unarmed civilians. You refused to surrender. You chose this outcome. Do you understand now why we sent one ship?" Thrace could not speak. He simply stared at her, his entire worldview shattered. The Valorian hegemony had conquered 14 civilizations. They were the most powerful military force in this sector of space, and they had been crushed by a single human warship in less than an hour. "You will remain here," Chen continued. "We are dispatching recovery vessels to take your surviving crew into custody. You will all stand trial for war crimes. Your fleet will be studied, then recycled, and one of your ships, the least damaged one, will be released to return to your homeworld." "Why?" Thrace finally managed to ask. "Why let any of us go?" Chen's expression hardened. "Because your leaders need to see what happened here. They need to understand what will happen if they attack humanity again. We did not want this war, Admiral. We never wanted it. But you started it and we will finish it. She gestured to someone off-screen. And the transmission ended. Admiral Thrace sat in his damaged command chair, surrounded by the ruins of his fleet, and understood that the galaxy had just changed forever. The Valorian hegemony had built their power on the assumption that they were the apex predators of space. That assumption was now revealed to be catastrophically wrong. The humans were not prey. They were not even competitors. They were something far more dangerous. 3 days later, the least damaged Valorian cruiser limped back to the hegemony homeworld. Its captain carried complete tactical recordings of the battle, detailed sensor logs, and a simple message from Captain Chen to Supreme Archon Kelvanus. The message contained only 5 words. This was your only warning. When the recordings were played before the military council, several officers fainted. Others demanded the footage be checked for manipulation or forgery. It was impossible, they insisted. No species could build such a vessel. No single ship could defeat an entire fleet. But Supreme Archon Kelvanus sat in silence, watching the recordings over and over. He saw his finest fleet torn apart like paper. He saw weapons that should not exist. He saw shields that laughed at the hegemony's most powerful attacks. And for the first time in his long life, Kelvanus felt the cold touch of fear. Mobilize the entire military, he said quietly. Contact the Zelthari Concordat, the Hive Collective, the merchant princes of Andraxis. Tell them we face a threat unlike any we have encountered. Tell them we must unite or we will all fall. Saren, standing at the back of the chamber, closed her eyes. She had tried to warn them. Now it was too late. The hegemony had kicked a sleeping giant, and that giant was now very much awake. The war had only just begun. The footage spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species with access to interstellar communications saw the recordings of the Battle of Corvish Nebula. The images were stark and undeniable. 200 Valorian warships reduced to scrap metal by a single human vessel in less than an hour. In the crystalline spires of the Zelthari Concordat, the Council of Minds gathered to discuss this new development. The Zelthari were an ancient race, their civilization older than most stars in the region. They prided themselves on their wisdom and their long view of galactic affairs. This changes the balance of power, High Mind Varshek observed, his crystalline body flickering with concerned colors. If the humans possess such technology, they could threaten any of us. Or defend us, another council member suggested. Perhaps we should seek alliance rather than confrontation. But Varshek was already receiving urgent communications from Supreme Archon Kelvanus. The Valorian leader was calling for a grand coalition, a united front against the human threat. The message was clear: band together now or face the humans alone later. In the hive cities of the collective, a different conversation was taking place. The hive operated through shared consciousness, millions of individuals thinking as one. They had no concept of individual ships or captains. Their fleets moved as living organisms coordinated perfectly through psionic links. The Hive Queen processed the battle data with interest. The humans fought as individuals, yet their coordination was nearly perfect. How did they achieve such unity without shared consciousness? The question fascinated and disturbed her in equal measure. Meanwhile, the merchant princes of Andraxis saw opportunity rather than threat. They were traders and business people first, warriors only when necessary. If human technology was so advanced, perhaps there were profits to be made in understanding it, copying it, or simply trading with those who possessed it. But across all these civilizations, one question dominated every conversation. How had humanity become so powerful? Saren had been asking herself the same question. As intelligence officer of the Valorian military, it was her job to find answers. She had spent the week since the battle, gathering every scrap of information about human history and development. What she discovered should have been impossible. She presented her findings to a small group of military analysts, away from the Supreme Archon's grandstanding and demands for immediate retaliation. Most species follow a similar path, Saren explained, displaying a holographic timeline. They develop on their homeworld, achieve spaceflight, discover faster-than-light travel, and begin colonizing other systems. The average time from first spaceflight to first interstellar colony is 73 years. She changed the display to show humanity's timeline. Humans are different. They achieved spaceflight nearly 600 years ago, but they did not discover FTL until 400 years later. For 4 centuries they were trapped in their own solar system. One of the analysts interrupted. That makes no sense. FTL is not that difficult to discover. Most species stumble upon the basic principles within a generation of leaving their atmosphere. Exactly, Saren said, which suggests humans are either remarkably stupid or remarkably unlucky. But their technology proves they are neither. So I asked myself, what were they doing for 400 years? She pulled up records of human solar system development. The images showed massive orbital stations, asteroid mining operations, planetary colonies, and generation ships designed to travel between stars at slower than light speeds. They were practicing, Saren said softly. They were learning how to survive in space, how to build in zero gravity, how to extract resources from lifeless rocks. They were testing every possible technology in the safety of their own solar system. When they finally discovered FTL, they did not rush out unprepared like most species. They came out already knowing how to thrive in space. Another display appeared showing human historical records. But there is more. Before they reached space at all, humans spent 10,000 years at war with themselves. They have records of conflicts dating back to their earliest civilizations. They perfected warfare long before they perfected spaceflight. The analysts stared at the data in growing horror. They saw records of ancient human conflicts, swords and spears giving way to gunpowder, then to automatic weapons, then to missiles and aircraft. They saw the development of nuclear weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons. They saw planetary wars that killed millions, conflicts that nearly destroyed human civilization multiple times. They almost destroyed themselves, one analyst whispered. Multiple times. Yes, Saren confirmed. And each time they learned. They studied war like we study art or philosophy. They wrote books about strategy, tactics, and logistics. They built entire schools dedicated to teaching warfare. And then finally they achieved global peace, but they never forgot the lessons they learned. She displayed the schematics of the TCS Retribution, captured by their sensors during the brief battle. This ship is not just advanced technology. It is 10,000 years of warfare condensed into steel and energy. Every system, every weapon, every defense was designed by a species that has been fighting since before they had written language. The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. Every other species in the galaxy had achieved peace before reaching the stars. They developed weapons only as needed, usually copying designs from species they encountered. Military innovation was slow, incremental, often neglected in favor of more peaceful pursuits. But humans had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing before they ever left their homeworld. They had then spent centuries more adapting those lessons to space warfare. By the time they made contact with other species, they were not newcomers to war. They were its oldest students. There is one more thing, Saren said, her voice grave. She displayed a document that had taken her days to translate properly. Humans have something they call laws of war, rules that govern how they fight, what weapons they can use, how they treat prisoners and civilians. That seems civilized, one analyst ventured. It is, Saren agreed. Humans created these laws to limit the brutality of their own conflicts. They try very hard to be peaceful. They prefer negotiation to violence, but... She paused, making sure everyone was paying attention. When their laws of war are broken by enemies, when civilians are deliberately targeted, when war crimes are committed against them, they set those laws aside. And they do not hold back. The analysts looked at each other with growing dread. The Supreme Archon had ordered the destruction of an unarmed civilian mining station. 3,000 deaths. By human standards, that was not just an act of war, it was a war crime of the highest order. We did not just attack them, one analyst said slowly. We gave them legal and moral justification to destroy us completely. Yes, Saren said simply. Across the galaxy, similar realizations were occurring. The more advanced species began serious investigations into human capabilities. What they found was terrifying. Humans had 47 warships of similar capability to the Retribution, one for each Valorian star system. They had shipyards capable of producing more. Their economy was based on a model of constant innovation and improvement, pushing technology forward even in peacetime. They had military academies that had been teaching warfare for centuries. They had veterans who had fought in border skirmishes and training exercises that simulated every possible combat scenario. And perhaps most disturbing, they had only deployed one ship in response to the initial attack. They were holding back, testing Valorian capabilities before committing their full force. The message was clear. This was not even their full strength. Supreme Archon Kelvanus refused to accept any of it. When Saren presented her findings to him, he threw the datapad across the room. Lies and fear-mongering, he shouted. You would have me believe that these creatures who only reached the stars 200 years ago are more powerful than the hegemony? Than all the civilizations of this sector combined? I would have you believe the evidence, Supreme Archon, Saren replied calmly, though her hearts were racing. The humans are not like other species we have encountered. They are different in fundamental ways. Different how? They bleed, do they not? Their ships can be destroyed. They are not gods. No, Saren agreed. They are not gods. But they are the only species in this galaxy that learn to kill before they learn to dream of stars. And they are very, very good at it. Kelvanus turned away from her, looking out at the capital city sprawling below his palace. The hegemony had stood for 3,000 years. They had crushed all opposition, and he would not let his legacy be defined by cowering before these upstart humans. Send messages to all our allies, he commanded. Tell them the Valorian hegemony calls for a grand coalition. The humans have shown themselves to be a threat to galactic order. They must be eliminated before they grow even stronger. 5 empires united against one young species. How can we fail? Saren said nothing. She simply bowed and left to carry out his orders, knowing that she was witnessing the beginning of the end. The Supreme Archon's pride would not let him see the truth. He had decided that humans were just another species to be conquered, another entry in the hegemony's long list of victories. He was wrong. Catastrophically, tragically wrong. The war began at dawn on 5 fronts simultaneously. 3,000 warships from 5 different empires emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edges of human-controlled systems. The Valorian hegemony committed 800 vessels. The Zelthari Concordat brought 600. The Hive Collective deployed 1,000 ships, each controlled by a single shared consciousness. The Merchant Princes sent 400, and various smaller allies contributed the rest. It was the largest combined military force assembled in galactic history. Supreme Archon Kelvanus commanded from his personal flagship, the Eternal Glory, a massive dreadnought 3 times the size of the vessel that had faced the Retribution. Today, we write history, Kelvanus announced to his allies over the command channel. Today, we show the humans that the established powers of this galaxy will not tolerate their aggression. Today, we end their threat forever. The response from the human colonies was immediate, but not what the coalition expected. Instead of the desperate defense they anticipated, instead of the overwhelming fear of facing impossible odds, the humans simply deployed their actual fleet. The TCS Retribution had been a patrol frigate. The ships that met the coalition were purpose-built weapons of war. 12 dreadnoughts led the human formation. Each was twice the size of the Retribution, bristling with weapons that made the frigate's armament look like training equipment. Their names spoke of human history and values: justice, vengeance, liberty, resolution, indomitable, defiance, perseverance, vigilance, resilience, determination, reckoning, and at the center, commanding the entire fleet, the TCS Unconquerable. Behind the dreadnoughts came 35 carrier vessels, each housing hundreds of fighter craft, piloted by humans who had trained their entire lives for combat. The fighters were small, fast, and deadly, capable of darting between larger ships to strike at weak points. And surrounding this core were 200 cruisers, each equivalent in power to the Retribution. They moved in perfect formation, their shields overlapping to create defensive networks that could withstand concentrated fire. Admiral Marcus Stone commanded the Unconquerable. He was older than Captain Chen, a veteran of the border wars where humanity had fought off pirates and raiders in the outer colonies. His face, weathered and scarred, appeared on every coalition command screen. This is Admiral Stone of the Terran Confederation. You have invaded sovereign human territory. You have declared war on our people. I am authorized to offer you one chance to withdraw. Leave now and we will allow you to retreat with your lives. Stay, and you will learn why humanity has survived 10,000 years of warfare. Supreme Archon Kelvanus laughed. You are outnumbered 10 to 1, Admiral. Your bravado means nothing. All ships advance! Show them the might of the coalition. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for generations, though not for the reasons Kelvanus expected. The coalition fleet advanced in a massive wall formation, overlapping fields of fire designed to overwhelm any defense through sheer volume. It was a proven tactic, one that had worked against every enemy they had ever faced. The humans did not meet them head-on. Instead, the fleet split into 4 smaller groups, each led by 3 dreadnoughts. They moved not as a solid block but as fluid formations, darting in and out of the coalition lines like sharks attacking a school of fish. "What are they doing?" demanded High-Mind Varshek of the Zilthari. "This makes no tactical sense. They are breaking their defensive cohesion." But Admiral Stone knew exactly what he was doing. The humans were not fighting a defensive battle. They were fighting an aggressive one, using tactics developed over millennia of warfare. Hit and run. Divide and conquer. Attack the flanks and create chaos in the enemy ranks. The coalition learned their first painful lesson. Individual ships meant nothing if they could not coordinate effectively. The 5 empires had different communication systems, different tactical doctrines, different response times. Trying to coordinate 3,000 ships from multiple species was like trying to conduct an orchestra, where each musician read a different language. The humans had no such problems. Every ship, every fighter, every weapon system was linked through quantum communication networks that operated in real time. Orders from Admiral Stone reached every vessel simultaneously. Tactical data flowed seamlessly between ships. They fought not as individual vessels but as a single unified force. The first coalition ships began to fall within minutes. Human fighters swarmed around Valorian cruisers, their small size making them nearly impossible to target effectively. They unleashed missiles at point-blank range, targeting engine sections and weapon systems. Behind them, the cruisers finished off disabled vessels with precise fire. The dreadnoughts were even more terrifying. Their main weapons were magnetic accelerator cannons that fired projectiles at 98% of light speed. At such velocities, the projectiles had more energy than some star systems generated in a year. When they struck coalition shields, they did not simply penetrate. They shattered them completely, often destroying multiple ships in a single shot, as the projectile continued through its target and into whatever was behind it. The Hive Collective tried to use their psionic coordination to counter human tactics. 1,000 ships moved as one organism, attempting to surround and crush a human battle group. But the humans had studied the Hive's tactics, captured from previous conflicts with other species. They knew the weakness: kill the command nodes. And the swarm lost coordination. Human fighters equipped with special warheads targeted the Hive's coordinator ships, vessels that served as relay points for the psionic network. When these ships died, entire sections of the Hive fleet went dark, ships drifting aimlessly as they lost their connection to the collective consciousness. "Impossible," the Hive Queen shrieked from her distant throne world. "How do they know our network structure? How do they identify our command nodes?" The answer was simple but terrifying. Humans had fought enemies like the Hive before. Not in space, but on their own world. Insect swarms, pack hunters, any enemy that fought with collective coordination. They had studied these behaviors for thousands of years. The Hive was not a new challenge. They were an old enemy with new technology. Supreme Archon Kelvanus watched his tactical display with growing horror as the coalition fleet began to disintegrate. 3,000 ships against 250, and somehow the coalition was losing. "All Valorian vessels concentrate fire on the human flagship," he commanded. "If we kill their admiral, they will lose coordination just like the Hive." 800 Valorian ships turned their weapons on the unconquerable. The massive dreadnought was struck by enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Its shields flared brilliant white, absorbing energy that could have evaporated oceans. And then the shields failed. For one brief moment, Kelvanus felt triumph. The human flagship was exposed, vulnerable. Weapons continued to pour fire into the vessel's hull, but the unconquerable did not die. The ship's armor was layered composite materials, designed to absorb and disperse energy. Plasma that should have melted through the hull was dispersed across self-repairing plates. Kinetic rounds that should have penetrated deep into the ship were stopped by reactive armor that exploded outward to counter the incoming force, and while the Valorians focused all their attention on killing the flagship, the rest of the human fleet struck at them from the sides and rear. Admiral Stone's voice came over the communication channel, calm despite his ship being under concentrated fire.
Captain Chen, you have tactical command.
I will be occupied for the next few minutes. Understood, Admiral, Chen replied from the Retribution, which had joined the battle as part of the cruiser screen. All ships pattern Delta 7. Protect the unconquerable and make them regret that decision. The human fleet moved with precision that seemed almost supernatural. Carriers launched their full complement of fighters, thousands of small craft that swarmed the Valorian formation. Cruisers formed a protective barrier around the damaged flagship, their shields overlapping to create a nearly impenetrable wall. And the other 11 dreadnoughts, freed from any need to hold back, unleashed their full arsenals. The coalition broke. It was not a retreat or a tactical withdrawal. It was a rout. Ships fled in all directions. Some so panicked they jumped to FTL without calculating safe vectors and were lost forever in the space between dimensions. Others tried to surrender but were caught in the crossfire as allies continued fighting around them. The merchant princes were the first to officially request ceasefire. Their spokesperson appeared on all channels, broadcasting surrender and begging for mercy. The humans accepted immediately, directing merchant vessels to a safe zone away from the fighting. The Zelthari Concordat held out longer, their pride preventing immediate surrender. But when 3 of their flagships were destroyed in rapid succession, High Mind Varshek gave the order to withdraw. The Zelthari fleet jumped away, leaving the battle. The Hive Collective simply went quiet. With their command structure shattered, the remaining ships drifted, their crews disconnected from the collective consciousness and unsure what to do. Human boarding parties secured them one by one, treating the confused Hive drones with surprising gentleness. Only the Valorian hegemony continued to fight. 6 months after the war ended, Supreme Archon Kelvanis stood in a courtroom on Earth. It was not what he expected. The building was simple, almost plain compared to the grand palaces and temples of the Valorian hegemony. The courtroom itself was designed for function rather than intimidation. Judges sat behind a raised bench, neutral and professional. Prosecutors presented evidence calmly and methodically, and most surprising of all, Kelvanis had been provided with defense attorneys, humans who argued on his behalf despite the crimes he had committed. "This is a mockery," Kelvanis had said when they first explained the process to him. "You defeated me. You have the right to execute me. Why do you pretend to care about justice?" His lead defense attorney, an older woman named Sarah Okonkwo, had looked at him with patient eyes. "Because this is how civilized beings conduct themselves, Archon. We do not simply execute our enemies. We prove their crimes, we allow them to defend themselves, and we let the evidence speak." "You are weak," Kelvanis spat. "No," Okonkwo replied. "We are strong enough to follow our principles even when facing our enemies. That is a strength your empire never understood." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Evidence was presented in excruciating detail. Recordings of the attack on the mining station. Testimonies from survivors of the coalition fleet. Expert witnesses explaining the laws of war and why Kelvanis's actions violated them. Throughout it all, Kelvanis remained defiant. He argued that he was simply defending Valorian territory, that the humans were invaders, that he had done nothing wrong by the standards of his own civilization. On the final day, before the judges delivered their verdict, Captain Sarah Chen took the stand. Not as a prosecutor, but as a witness to provide context. "Captain Chen," the lead judge asked, "you were the first human to engage with the Valorian military. Can you explain to this court why humanity responded so forcefully to the initial attack?" Chen spoke clearly and calmly. "The Valorian fleet destroyed an unarmed civilian station without warning, without provocation, and without mercy. 3,000 people died, including families, children, researchers whose only crime was mining asteroids in what we believed was unclaimed space. By our laws, by the principles we have developed over thousands of years of warfare, this was not just an act of war, it was a war crime of the highest order. And yet," the judge continued, "humanity could have responded with diplomacy. You could have lodged formal complaints, sought mediation, or simply avoided the sector entirely. Why did you instead send a warship?" Chen was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Because we have learned through painful experience that aggressors do not respect weakness. The Valorian hegemony had conquered 14 civilizations. If we had shown weakness, they would have attacked again. We needed to make it clear that humanity would defend itself and that there would be consequences for attacking civilians. Kelvanus could not help himself. He stood from his seat, scales flushing with anger. You speak of defense, yet you destroyed my fleet. You killed thousands of my people. The judges called for order, but Chen looked directly at Kelvanus and spoke. We gave you a chance to surrender. Before the battle at Corvesh Nebula, I offered you the opportunity to stand down. You refused. During the final battle, my admiral gave the entire coalition a chance to withdraw. You refused. Even then, we targeted engines and weapons, trying to disable rather than destroy. We took thousands of prisoners and treated them well. We did everything we could to minimize loss of life while still defending ourselves. You could have done nothing, Kelvanus shouted. You could have let us have that sector. Chen's expression hardened. You killed 3,000 unarmed civilians. Did you expect us to do nothing? Did you think we would simply accept the slaughter of our people? The courtroom fell silent. Kelvanus stood there, breathing heavily, and for the first time he saw the truth in Chen's eyes. Not hatred, not triumph, but something he had never expected to see. Disappointment. You could have been neighbors, Chen said quietly. You could have traded with us, learned from us, shared the stars with us. Instead you chose violence, and you forced us to respond in kind. We did not want this war, Archon, but you gave us no choice. Kelvanus sat down slowly, something breaking inside him. For 3,000 years, the Valorian hegemony had taken what they wanted by force. It was how the galaxy worked. The strong dominated the weak. That was the natural order. But the humans had shown him that there was another way. They were strong enough to destroy the hegemony completely, yet they held trials. They took prisoners. They followed laws even in war. They were warriors who chose to be more than their capacity for violence. The judges delivered their verdict the next day. Kelvanus was found guilty of war crimes, crimes against sentient beings, and unlawful military aggression. His sentence, life imprisonment to be served under house arrest on a human colony world, where he would spend the rest of his days studying human history and philosophy. We do not execute prisoners, the lead judge explained, even ones who have caused such harm. We believe that every being has the capacity to learn and change. Whether you choose to do so is up to you. Kelvanus was taken to a colony world called New Hope. It was a peaceful place with rolling hills and vast oceans. His prison was a comfortable house overlooking a valley where human colonists grew crops and raised families. He had access to a library filled with human history, philosophy, and literature. At first he refused to read any of it. But as the months passed and loneliness set in, curiosity eventually won out. He started with human military history. He wanted to understand how they had defeated him so completely. What he found shocked him to his core. The humans had fought wars that made the coalition battle look like a minor skirmish. The 2 world wars, conflicts that killed hundreds of millions, the nuclear standoff where 2 human nations had enough weapons to destroy their entire planet, and came within moments of doing so. Countless smaller conflicts, rebellions, and civil wars that had scarred their history. But interspersed with these horrors were stories of humans reaching across divides, former enemies becoming allies, weapons being turned into peaceful tools. The same species that had created fusion bombs had used fusion to power cities. The same minds that designed fighter jets had built spacecraft to explore the cosmos. Humans had not conquered their violent nature. They had learned to channel it, to control it, to use it only when necessary. And they had built laws, international agreements, and moral frameworks to try to prevent future wars even as they prepared for them. One particular document caught Kelvanus's attention. It was called the Geneva Conventions, a set of rules governing warfare that humans had created centuries ago. He read through the provisions with growing amazement. Wounded soldiers must be treated humanely. Prisoners of war must not be tortured. Civilians must never be deliberately targeted. Medical personnel must be protected. These were not suggestions or ideals. They were laws that human militaries followed even in the heat of battle, even when facing enemies who did not reciprocate. Kelvanus thought back to his order to destroy the mining station. To him, it had been a simple matter of clearing trespassers from Valorian space. He had not considered the workers there as people, just obstacles to be removed. The humans saw it differently. Every life had value. Every death required justification. And the deliberate killing of civilians was the gravest crime imaginable. He began reading human philosophy next. Works by people named Kant, King, Gandhi, Mandela. Humans who had advocated for peace, for justice, for treating all beings with dignity. And he learned something that shook him deeply. The humans were not naturally peaceful. They were naturally violent, competitive, and aggressive, just like the Valorians. But they had chosen, consciously and deliberately, to build a civilization that constrained those impulses. They had decided that being strong meant protecting the weak, not exploiting them. One evening, Captain Chen visited him. She came alone, without guards, and sat across from him on his porch as the sun set over the valley. "Why are you here?" Kelvanis asked. "I wanted to see how you were adjusting," Chen replied, "and to answer a question you asked during the trial. You wanted to know why humans are so much more advanced in warfare." Kelvanis nodded slowly. "I have been reading your history. I am beginning to understand. Tell me what you have learned." Kelvanis looked out at the peaceful valley. "You spent 10,000 years fighting yourselves. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy was developed not against alien enemies but against other humans. You learned warfare from the inside, understanding both how to attack and how to defend because you were always fighting people just like yourselves." "That is part of it," Chen agreed. "What else?" "You almost destroyed yourselves multiple times. You created weapons that could end your entire species, and you came very close to using them. But you did not. You chose to step back from the brink, to create rules and laws that would prevent total annihilation. You learned restraint through near extinction." Chen smiled slightly. "You are learning. Is there more?" Kelvanis was quiet for a long time. "You never stopped innovating. Most species reach the stars and become comfortable. They stop pushing forward, stop taking risks. But you spent 400 years trapped in your solar system,